This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. Ding Ling and the others only took a glance at the opening of the void channel and then paid no more attention to it. Their eyes were fixed on the sky, and their faces were full of worry. In the sky, Yu's ancestral power erupted and broke Yunxiao's thunderbolt form. Under the sword beam, Yunxiao's expanding thunderbolt shadow was cut in half, and bright red blood sprayed into the sky. The thunderbolt suddenly receded 100 meters away in the air, revealing Yunxiao's true body. His face was pale, and there was a long bloody wound on his chest. It was a shocking sight. There were still lightning crackling around him, getting weaker and weaker. In the name of the high priest of the demon race, I will kill you today. Yu's aura burst forth and demonic chi soared into the sky. Even his body swelled up again, becoming bigger than before. The taillight sword also grew in size, shooting out tens of thousands of sword rays in the air that fell like rain. At this moment, the power in his body was no longer ordinary elemental energy, but the power of the ancestors of the demon race that had been passed down from ancient times. It was his determination to kill Yunxiao. This is the power of the ancestral bloodline of the monster race. Yu's talent is shocking, but he's only opened 3. I think he'll be heaven-defying if he can open 7 at his peak. And you have the power of the ancestor's mother in your body, Shang Linkong said slowly. That's the source of the ancestral bloodline of the demon race. In theory, as long as you're strong enough, you can cultivate countless ancestral bloodlines. In other words, you have endless room for growth, even far beyond mine. His eyes were fixed on Li Yi, and he said enviously, I also don't understand why the monster race's parent body's power would be in the bodies of 2 abnormal humans, and why it would be obtained by you in the end. However, since this was the case, it was heaven's will. As long as you're loyal to me, I'll bring you to the top step by step. Li Yi looked at the power that was erupting from the rain, and his entire body was filled with excitement. At this moment, he suddenly felt a sense of pride, and all the suffering he had gone through was finally paid off. The peak of the world, a place that no one dared to think of. In the past, his dream was to seize the Li clan's power and wealth. He would be satisfied if he could become a martial king in his life. He could not imagine how short it had been. Everything had changed since Yunxiao's appearance here. He had tasted the most terrible pain in the world, but he had also received great returns today. The dream of becoming a martial king in the past was no longer even a piece of trash in his eyes. I swear my loyalty to Lord Sheng, Li Yi said firmly, please take me to the peak of this world. Richard smiled and nodded, no longer saying anything. He watched the duel below while trying to repair the armillary sphere. Yunxiao's vitality was greatly damaged after being cut by the sword, so he quickly swallowed a lot of medicinal pills. As the 10,000 sword beams were extremely sharp, he suddenly performed an incantation gesture with his right hand, summoning the Devil Sky Silk. Then, a stream of demonic energy emerged from his palm and shot into the armor. Suddenly, the shadow of the armor appeared, and the defense was several feet away. The demonic chi was still pouring into it. His third heaven's eye suddenly opened, and the ancient dynasty bell that suppressed the demonic chi was also released. It rang with an ancient sound that shook the sky. Boom boom boom. The 10,000 sword radiances all slashed at the defense of the devil's celestial world, and circles of black devil chi spread out like rain falling on the ground, creating ripples in the air. The demonic sky armor was an extremely powerful defensive armor of the 9th step, but because he had forced out the demonic chi, it had been like a piece of scrap metal. Now that he had poured demonic chi into it, it instantly recovered its tyrannical defense. Then, the sound of the dynasty bell rang out, and the decadent ancient sound washed over the dark sky, shaking people's hearts and souls. Yu stood in the sky and roared. A force suddenly burst out from his body, forming a circular defense that directly isolated the bell. He said coldly, no matter how many 9th-tier profound armaments you have, under the suppression of this dragon's might, can you control them? Take out that jade tablet of yours, or else it will only speed up your death. He raised his taillight sword and drew circles in the air. They were like bubbles blown out by a child with soap. They connected one by one and formed a chain of bubbles under the sword Qi's waving. He then attacked. Yunxiao closed his heavenly eyes and pointed at the devil sky silk with his right hand. Then, the northern heaven cold sword appeared in his right hand, and with a slash, dozens of sword beams also rushed out and slashed at the bubbles. Right now, his condition was exactly as what you had said. Although he had many profound armaments, he was unable to control them all at once. The consumption was simply too great. Bang bang. Yunxiao's sword beams burst the bubbles one by one with irresistible force. His heart suddenly trembled, and his intuition told him that something was wrong. In his pupils, he saw a large amount of sword energy condense, and after each bubble burst, it burst into a large amount of sword energy that shot out in the air indiscriminately. As if a meat grinder had been thrown into the air, Yunxiao was caught in the air in the blink of an eye, and the air was cut open by a bright light. The people of the Merchant Union were all drenched in cold sweat. Was this still a battle between a martial emperor and a martial venerable? Everyone's mind was on Yunxiao at the moment, and they were all worried when they saw him trapped in the sword beam. Boom! A ball of light burst out of the meat-like sword beam, and streams of primordial astral winds swept it up. A tornado swept out with Yunxiao at its center, and all three of his eyes were open, turning into the color of blood moons and bloodshot. Must you kill me? I'll see what you have to kill me with today. Yunxiao roared as he raised the northern heaven's cold star sword in his hand. Under the control of his soul power, the strong wind around him slowly gathered on the sword. At the same time, a phoenix flame appeared and dormant in it, while a dragon's shadow flickered inside the sword. Yu's face became ferocious, the three bloodlines on his body were terrifyingly red, and the light on the tail light sword was unprecedentedly powerful. Both of them were accumulating strength and circulating their qi, planning to finish the battle in one fell swoop. At this moment, the sky was torn into two distinct parts by the aura of the two. Sword art, slay demons. Clear sky sword, 13. Two shocking sword qis rushed up and collided in the air. A black crack was torn between the two forces and flashed in the sky like a black dragon. A terrifying aura spread out from the endless void. Everyone who looked at it felt the same. You should die. As the two forces collided, the tissues and functions of his body began to explode. The use of this power had exceeded the limits of his endurance. Yu Meng gritted his teeth and swallowed the blood from his internal organs. One of the three terrifying blood vessels in his body suddenly expanded, bang. It directly exploded. A terrifying force washed over his entire body. He didn't care if he could withstand it or not as he roared and pressed down on the sword in his hand. Finally, Yunxiao's sword beam could not withstand the pressure and was crushed. As soon as Yu Yi's sword hit Yunxiao, he rushed over madly and slashed down with the sword energy, trying to cut Yunxiao in half. The big demon in the sky was already dumbfounded. He didn't expect that Yu would directly explode his Zu meridian. Li even covered his mouth with his hands in horror, his eyes sparkling. On what basis? Just because I'm more ruthless than you. On the basis of the high priest's honor. Yu roared and slashed down. The shadows of the devil sky armor that appeared around Yunxiao crumbled under the sword qi, and the black demonic energy disappeared as well. Bang! The tail-light sword struck the devil sky armor, producing a deafening boom. It scattered the last of the devil qi in the armor and broke it apart. The momentum of the sword did not diminish, and after shattering the devil sky silk, it went straight into Yunxiao's body. Ding Ling and the others trembled, and their legs almost went soft and were about to collapse. Pfft. A large mouthful of blood sprayed out of Yunxiao's mouth. The tail-light sword had pierced through his body, and a green thunderbolt flickered. Although part of it had turned into a thunderbolt, it still could not stop the sword qi from entering his body and injuring him. Suddenly, there was a soft slap, and Yu's pupils constricted as he saw Yunxiao's right hand grab his hand that was holding the sword. Meanwhile, Yunxiao poured out a large handful of medicinal pills from his left hand and poured them into his mouth like beans before swallowing them. Yu Xian's heart skipped a beat. Just from the smell of those pills, he could tell that they were 9th grade. Even a great demon's body would not be able to take so many 9th-tier medicinal pills at once and explode to death. You said you're more ruthless than me? Yunxiao suddenly said. His body slowly turned into a demon, covered with scales and gradually turning golden, with a bright lunar divine light shining out of it. He clenched his right hand and pulled Yu's body towards him. He raised his head slightly and used his head as a hammer to hit Yu. He roared, "You said you're more ruthless than me? I'll show you what true ruthlessness is today." His golden head directly hit Yu's forehead, and blood burst out. No one could tell whose blood it was. Yu let out a miserable cry, then Yunxiao hugged him and raised his knee to hit him in the chest. Yu's huge body immediately let out a muffled sound, and a large number of bones exploded. His body was lifted into the air, and his face was filled with pain. Yunxiao slowly loosened his right hand, then returned to his front and clasped his hands together in an incantation gesture. Suddenly, 3 strong sword energies shot out of his body, and 3 northern heaven cold star swords appeared around him. As he continued to perform the incantation gesture, they resonated with each other and connected into one, and a sea of sword energies spread out. Gulp. At this moment, everyone swallowed hard, their eyes filled with fear. They would never have dreamed that a battle between a martial emperor and a martial honor could be so tragic. Yunxiao's endless means had completely stunned the people of the Merchant Union. They had all come to this point, as if he had an endless number of trump cards. Luo Ying licked his dry lips and said with difficulty, "Was that sword art slaying demons?" He really knows the 3 sword techniques of army-breaking Gu Feiyang, but the golden light on his body at this moment, could it be a swan and eye? Zhang Chang's forehead was also covered in cold sweat. "You're not going to say that it's the inextinguishable golden body, are you?" Everyone's heart jolted. Although everyone had the same thought, they did not dare to say it out loud. Only Lord Ao Chungkong's inextinguishable golden body can cultivate the body refining technique to this level, Cui Bo said in a grave tone. This Li Yunxiao's background is too unusual. Xian Yutong's eyes lit up and he suddenly exclaimed, "It really is him. I don't know if that body art is the inextinguishable golden body, but this move must be the Divine Cloud Palace's heavenly sword picture." His cry immediately caused everyone to be shocked. They looked up at the sky and the sea of swords that was overflowing with shock. Yunxiang's body trembled, and her eyes were filled with confusion. Her emotions seemed to have returned to the fairyland-like sect. Could he be from the Divine Cloud Palace? However, the Divine Cloud Palace has been sealed off for a long time, and I've never heard of any male disciples. Cui Bo shook his head in disbelief. Everyone was waiting for Elder Xian to continue, but he suddenly shut his mouth, causing everyone to faint and feel an unbearable itch in their hearts. Hundreds of meters above the ground, Yunxiao's 3 swords were hanging upside down in the air, connecting with each other under his incantation seals. At this moment, all of his strength was activated. He had poured too many pills into his body, and all kinds of complicated forces were in chaos. Fortunately, the imperishable golden body was strong enough to suppress those chaotic forces and absorb them at the same time. Yu was sent flying by Yunxiao's kick. His face was filled with disbelief, and his pupils gradually constricted. At that moment, the power brought by the destruction of the ancestral bloodline was gradually disappearing, and his body was almost destroyed. However, his mind was unusually calm at that moment. He looked at the astonishing aura emanating from Yunxiao's 3 swords, but he could not feel anything. "I, Yingluo, have lost in the end, Yingluo?" Yu's heart sighed, and he became completely oblivious to the pain in his body. He began to feel melancholic, and the sky became darker in his eyes, as if it was raining heavily, with lightning and thunder crackling. "Quick, he's right in front, don't let him run. I didn't expect this little bastard to be a member of the prison demon clan. I should have killed him back then. Don't talk nonsense. All prison demons must die." Raindrops were flying in the forest. Hearing the sounds behind him, his heart was filled with fear. The rain fell on his young face, and he could not tell if it was water or tears. There was only one thought in his mind: escape endlessly, escape from this sky. Boom. In the heavy rain, a bolt of lightning struck down from the sky and exploded under Yu's feet, sending him flying. Wah! Yu was so scared that he cried and fell to the ground. More than a dozen shadows surrounded him and laughed wildly. The heavens are helping us. It seems that it's the will of the heavens to exterminate the prison demon race. Why? Why do you want to kill me? We're all demons, shouldn't we be united and live in harmony? Yu suddenly found the courage to question him loudly. He was completely tired of the days of running away and was in complete despair. Lightning crossed in the sky and struck down. The green light flickered on his face and it was full of watermarks. Why? This little brat is actually asking why. One of them walked forward, and under the light of the lightning, his face appeared ferocious. He had 2 horns on his head and looked terrifying. He said fiercely, "Then let me tell you why. It's all because of your ancestors that the entire demon race has fallen under the 5-cloud mountain, leaving us to struggle on our last breaths and live in this illusionary sky. All members of the prison demon clan should die." He pulled out a long sword in anger, which emitted a cold light, and slashed down without hesitation. The shadow of the sword was getting closer and closer in Yu's eyes. His heart was in complete despair, and he had given up on the idea of living. The prison demon clan? There are still people from the prison demon clan. A hoarse voice rang out, and then the sword light suddenly broke with a bang. Yu's face was dazed. Who are you? Who's there? The demons chasing after you were all furious, but judging from the fact that he had broken his sword just now, his strength must be extraordinary. The man didn't pay attention to the questions and just pointed his finger at Yu's shoulder blade, causing him to cry out in pain. A stream of blood immediately shot out from the scapula, which was then condensed into a ball of blood in the man's hand. He opened his mouth and swallowed it. Gulp. The sound of swallowing came from the man's throat, and he suddenly said in joy, delicious. It's indeed the prison demon clan. The heavens have eyes, I actually met a member of the prison demon clan. Who are you? The demons behind him couldn't hold it in any longer. They shouted and rushed up one by one. Ingluo, who are you? Are you going to eat me? Yu backed away in fear, thinking that it was better to be killed by those people than eaten by this man. A bolt of lightning exploded in the sky, and the light reflected on the face of the person who came. It turned out to be an old face with eyes full of joy. He stared at him like a hungry wolf and laughed, "Who am I?" Who am I? You don't need to know. From now on, I'm your master. As the person laughed, a burst of chi burst out from his body and shook behind him. The dozen demons instantly screamed in pain as they were blown to pieces. Master, what exactly happened back then? Why do you say that my prison demon race has harmed the entire demon race? Bullshit. This was just what the demon emperor used to brainwash everyone. The prison demon clan has been one of the 8 strongest clans since ancient times. The demon emperor was your ancestor. Do you know why I want to take you as my disciple? I don't know, Master, please enlighten me. Because I hope that one day, you will be able to unseal the 5-cloud mountain and rescue the demon clan. Your ancestors are also inside. I want you to help the prison monster clan and Master's monster slayer clan wash away the injustice and humiliation they suffered in the past 1,000 years. Yu's thoughts gradually returned from that youth. The sky was as dark as that night. His master's face flickered in the distant high sky, and finally turned into stars. 1,000 years of persistence, the injustice of the prison demon clan and the nightmare demon clan, and the humiliation of the divine cloud palace to the demon clan. These voices kept echoing in Yu's mind, and 2 streams of tears flowed down. The 2 Zhu's bloodlines and the shriveled Zhu's bloodline on his body suddenly swelled up, turning a bright red. Yunxiao's eyes narrowed as he said coldly, "Why are you still struggling when you're about to die? Can't you just die in peace?" Bang. Bang. 2 of Yu's ancestor bloodlines exploded one after another, and his body, which was about to fall silent, was filled with power again. Large drops of tears flowed down from his eyes as he roared, "It's not that I'm afraid of death, it's just that I didn't fulfill my promise to Master." How do you expect me to meet him after I die? The roar of you reverberated in the sky. Li's body couldn't help but tremble. He turned his head and couldn't bear to look. Lord Sheng, my master, and I will entrust our unfinished dreams to you. Please do it, I won't be able to see the day you ascend to the Demon Emperor's throne. Yu's huge body kowtowed towards the sky. The day I ascend to the throne will be the day the Hell Demons and the Monster Slayer race return to the 8 Guardian Demon races in glory. Shang's face was pale. I'm relieved, Ingluo. Yu suddenly raised his head, and the tail light sword in his hand burst out with terrifying sword chi. His body also kept expanding, about to explode at any time. Yunxiao's heart trembled violently. He had wanted to use the heavenly sword diagram to get rid of his opponent directly, but the aura that burst out at this moment was simply irresistible. In his horror, he hurriedly threw out the Divine Realm tablet, and complicated incantation seals flashed in his hands, pouring into it. In fact, when Yu had exploded his Zu Meridian and stabbed him with his sword, he was almost at the end of his life. He couldn't care about the consequences anymore and immediately activated the inextinguishable golden body. He also poured a large number of medicinal pills into his body. Now, the two of them were like explosives that could explode at any time and could die at any time. They were completely joined together in a fierce battle. Under his full control, the Divine Realm tablet's light brightened. 3 forces of territory opened and stacked on top of each other, pressing down on Yu. Now, Yu was determined to die and increase his power regardless of the consequences. The infinite weight of the earth and the power of wind and fire pressed down. On the other side, his sky sword pattern formation was still brewing. The 3-sword formation was much more complicated than the 2-sword pattern. The various fine control had consumed a lot of his soul power. Even though he had merged with the demonic dragon, it was still on the verge of collapse. Li Yunxiao, take my last blow. You are a formidable opponent. If you can survive this strike, you will win. The sound of Yu was extremely calm. The tail light sword, which was originally cold and shining on the water, had now turned red as if it was burning. Its weapon essence was even more terrifying. You're a fucking lunatic. Yunxiao gritted his teeth and cursed. Not only did you blow up 2 ancestral veins, but he also intended to blow up the tail light sword, a 9th-tier mystic artifact. Clear Sky Sword Technique, 13. These were Yu in the world's last words. His entire body combined with the tail light sword, turning into a stunning sword light that streaked across the sky, incomparably gorgeous. Boom boom boom. The Divine Realm tablet's 3 streams of territory power were blasted away one after another. After blocking the attack for a while, the Divine Realm tablet flew back and sank into Yunxiao's forehead. Yunxiao was horrified. The huge sword beam had actually opened up a dark passage under the array. He gritted his teeth and poured his energy into his palms. With a slap of the sword diagram, the 3 northern heaven cold star swords suddenly merged into one, spreading out a mountain-like sword energy and pressing down fiercely. The sky sword formation struck onto the rain with the ultimate sword. The entire sky was filled with an ocean of sword chi. The 2 earth-shaking forces struck and shook the entrance of the pitch-black tunnel like a sun. The entire Jushi formation became unstable and showed signs of collapsing.